session. So recording is starting now, so go all over to you now, Heather.
Okay, thank you very much, Emma. So so welcome to the RNIB presentation today. As I say, it's the Royal National Institute of Blind People, and it's the 6th in our Seeing Opportunities series of live webinars. And today we'll be looking at going back into the workplace as lockdown eases, and in particular for employees with sight loss. We'll be discussing some simple steps for making the workplace safer for our blind and partially sighted employees. As our country continues its journey out of lockdown, many of us are now beginning to return to the workplace. Of course, there's regional differences depending where you are in the UK or elsewhere, but we'll be sort of looking at kind of more general kind of advice. We are sort of gradually moving back into the workplace. But what does this mean for people with sight loss? So today we'll be looking at the ways in which employers can make sure that their workplace is safe for their employees with sight loss. And we'll be thinking about some simple steps that we can all take to support our blind and partially sighted colleagues and customers too. As Emma said, we'd like to invite you to use the chat facility with any thoughts that you might have, or points that you'd like to raise, or questions that you'd like to ask. And periodically through the presentation, I'll perhaps ask Emma if she could tell me if there are any comments or questions in there, and we can address them as we go along. And towards the end of today's presentation, I'll be introducing an online quiz, which you could do in your own time. I'd like to say if we have time, we could go through it, but I'm thinking we probably won't. Usually we get quite a few comments and questions along the way. So there'll be a link provided, so you can go into the quiz and do it in your own time. And I think it'll give you some thoughts to take away with you. So if we could move on to the next slide, please, Helen. Sorry, not Helen, it's Emma today. Okay, thank you. So yeah, for the last 18 months or so, we've looked to our governments for rules and guidance around our journey through lockdown. And there's no doubt at all that lockdown has impacted massively around employment and the workplace. Different ways of doing things, everything has just been so unfamiliar to us, although we in some ways kind of getting to grips with how things have been lately, but we're now looking at returning to work and things are going to change again. So initially most of us began working from home, and for many I know this also included homeschooling our children. I don't envy people at all who are in that situation. My daughter has 3 young children and she's like, I'm not trained or equipped to do this. So yeah, I don't envy that. The job retention scheme meant that many of us were furloughed, and sadly some industries were so badly hit that many companies had to close, leaving lots and lots of people out of work. So a huge impact on us. And as the furlough scheme continues to wind down over the coming weeks, we might see this in some ways as a welcome indication that things are going back to normal. However, some employers may not be able to keep their furloughed staff on. And I think in particular industries which rely on COVID restrictions ending, for example, the hospitality sector. And there's genuine concerns that until businesses are able to operate more fully, jobs sadly will be lost. So without a doubt, COVID has had a huge impact on work as we know it. And our return to the workplace brings, of course, many more challenges, which is what we're going to look at today. So Emma, if we could go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. Here we're looking at employers, and employers are now looking to bring people back to the workplace, and government guidance shows how this should be done. So while there's differing timescales and ways this return will be implemented across the UK, government advice for employers generally includes the same things. So we're asked to encourage your staff to continue working from home if that's possible. And for many employers, that might mean a blended approach with staff working from home on some days and coming into the workplace on others. Employers are required to carry out COVID risk assessments and would of course be encouraged to do this in consultation with their staff and perhaps trade unions as well. Good advice still includes maintaining social distancing and wherever that's possible. And where this can't be done, it's about managing the transmission risk. So this would perhaps include reinforcing cleaning processes of the premises on an ongoing basis and personal hygiene measures around hand washing. It's likely that we'll be seeing the ongoing use of face coverings as well, particularly indoors and in areas where ventilation is really quite poor or restricted. So to help employers think about their employees with sight loss and any additional steps that they might need to take, RNIB's employment team put together a short video where we offered some top tips for employers. And the video lasts about 1.5 minutes, and I plan to show it to you just now. If you could load that up for me, please, Emma, that would be smashing. Hello, Emma. I'm not sure if we're still all in here. I'm not getting anything coming through to me at the moment.
Hi, yeah, it was playing at my end.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Let's have a quick vote. Can anybody in chat let us know whether or not there has? If not, we may need to send the link if it's a bandwidth issue. Let me just have a quick look in chat. No, it's not coming up. So I can only apologise that it might be down to the bandwidth of my Wi-Fi here at home. So my suggestion would be that we put the link into the chat.
Yep.
So what I'll do is I'll just do that a second.
Okay. I'm actually quite relieved it wasn't just me that had fallen out of the...
No, it happens. So, it does happen. One of the technological wonders of working from home. So let's have a look at this, and I'll send it. So let me just send this to everybody. Okay, there we go. So the link is there, folks. If you just want to take a moment to copy that and paste it somewhere so you can refer to it afterwards. Are you happy for us to carry on, and we'll just we'll ask people to watch the video afterwards?
That sounds good with me. Yep. If everybody's happy to continue. So yeah, the video, it was quite fun doing it. I'm one of the participants in the video, and of course we were all doing it from home, and then we had to send our little parts of it into our videographer, who very cleverly put it together and made us all look slightly more professional than our home efforts on our phone. So in the video, different members of the employment team around the country are talking about some of the steps that employers might take to make the workplace more accessible for employees with sight loss. So the types of things mentioned are, protective screens like we see on the screen just now. It's a clear sheet. It could be quite difficult to see. So perhaps some, coloured tape put around the back, the edges of the screen to make it more visible. And it talked about being aware of, markings on the floor where people are asked to stand so that we're not too close together. It might not be visible for someone. A strong point was raised about the social distancing, which for people with sight loss, if you have very restricted vision or no vision at all, you might not be aware that you're actually standing next to someone. So social distancing can be very, very difficult. So that's the sort of the general gist of the video, but please do watch it. So yeah, if we could move on to the next slide, please, Helen. Helen, sorry, I keep saying Emma. Thank you. Okay, so what about your blind and partially sighted customers who are now going back into the workplace, or if you have colleagues with sight loss who are coming back to work with you in your team? This is really about looking at what concerns they might have, and sometimes it's things that people haven't even thought about. So these people might be going back to a very different workplace than the one they left in March last year. And that can be quite disorientating for anyone. Nothing's quite where it was left before. And as we would have seen in the video clip, one-way systems can be quite hard to follow. The route that someone previously took to their desk, which may not be their desk anymore, is quite different. There's protective screens, which can be a problem, and locating hand sanitizing stations can be difficult too. So for people with sight loss, there are some other additional sight loss specific things to think about as well. So for example, when we're travelling to and from work, many blind and partially sighted people will use public transport. And that can be challenging because there will be risk assessment strategies implemented by the transport company, as we see on the screen here. They'll be looking to remove or to reduce COVID risks for passengers while they're travelling. So for example, some seats will be taped off to keep a distance between people as they travel. So that, you know, if you have very limited vision, that could be quite difficult to find, you know, find your way to a safe, available seating area. Many people will not have used public transport since before lockdown, and many of the train and bus stations will have one-way systems in place. And I know from people that I've spoken to that this is something that many hadn't even thought about until they find themselves lost and needing help to try and find the entry or exit point of, you know, a bus or a train station. You know, people thought, well, I'll be fine. I'm used to using the transport, but I hadn't anticipated that when they got off the bus or the train, the route to the door was quite different from what it had been last time. So again, this can bring even more problems if somebody needs to be guided to where they're going to. So how would you offer your arm to a person with sight loss when we're all being told to try and keep a distance from each other? So blind and partially sighted people can receive sighted guiding, you know, assistance from somebody for permitted activities and journeys. And our website highlights important steps to follow, because we do need to make sure that we're minimising any risks of catching or passing on COVID. So, you know, with more activities now possible, whether that's work or leisure, it's important to bear in mind that the government guidance on good hand and respiratory hygiene and social distancing, face covers, all these things remain in place, even if we are vaccinated. And people who were previously shielding should also continue to take care, of course, even if they've been vaccinated too. We are still encouraged to maintain, where possible, 2 metre distancing in the workplace. I know there's regional variations. I'm in Scotland, obviously, and up here we still go with the 2 metre rule. But, you know, how practical is that? And that's something really, you know, to think about for everyone to, you know, everyone to think about and consider. As we would have seen it also in the video, blind and partially sighted people might find social distancing in itself difficult if they're unable to see their colleagues. And if this is the case, you know, to stress what's in the video, the onus should be placed on sighted colleagues to make their blind and partially sighted colleague aware of their presence and to try and keep that distance. Another thing people sometimes haven't thought about is, what about emergencies and evacuating the building? So most blind and partially sighted people will understand the need for plans to deal with unexpected evacuations, for example, in the case of a fire. Things like that are usually covered as part of someone's induction into their job, and some people will have a personal evacuation plan in place. But how will social distancing and one-way systems affect evacuation plans and routes? Again, something that we might need to consider returning to work. I wondered, as I've been going on for a while now, Emma, could we see if people perhaps want to, you know, offer any thoughts or comments in the chat facility just now?
Yeah, if anybody does want to say anything at all, please do. We haven't got anything there at the moment, but I think people are just listening intently. I certainly am. Okay, yep, okay, that's smashing, no problem at all. So, okay, so we're on to the slide that talks about employment professionals. So, which is, you know, what we guys today, this is what we do. So,
we've seen that, you know, with lockdown easements and a return to the workplace, a gradual return to the workplace, there's a number of things an employer would be best advised to put in place to support their employees with sight loss. And we've also touched on a couple of points which an employee returning to work might, or indeed might not have considered. At this point, I just want to, you know, look at, well, what about us as service providers? What might we need to think about when we're supporting a blind or partially sighted colleague or a customer who's coming back into our workplace or into our service? I know that around the country, you know, some of the local employability services are starting to open up more to customers coming in. I don't know if that applies to anybody, you know, in the group today, but I wondered if people could perhaps in the chat mention, you know, what sort of face-to-face, if any, work that they're doing now. Have they started to open the doors to customers coming in again, or are we still doing things remotely?
Just give people a chance to have an answer in chat. I know that for us at the IEP and our team, we're all very much still remote. So it'd be interesting to get a show of hands for those that are starting to see people face to face or not. Yeah. I know that some people that I've spoken to, you know, service providers, we've been face to face, of course, in schools, and we have. You know, sometimes people don't have the, you know, computer set up at home, and they're starting to come back into the service in limited numbers, you know, to be able to use computers for. Yeah, we've got some responses. Fred has said, I work in schools and have been face to face in schools whenever the pupils are in. Kate Tully has said, we've rearranged the office so learners can have their own space from tutors away from employment coaches. Sam has said we are having appointment only when coming to face and no drop-ins allowed. So some control there. And obviously Kate has also then said, I think we will start in the beginning of August. I'm guessing she means in terms of more face-to-face. And it looks like, yeah, people are starting on the whole to have a gradual reintroduction of face-to-face with the expectation to ramp it up, I guess, as the restrictions reduce in the next week or so. Yeah, that's it. I think that seems to be the general theme, that the doors are to some extent opening, and it sounds as though you guys all have similar measures in place, which, you know, are, I think some of the things we've spoken today, you know, about today will be particularly relevant now that that work is happening. So, yeah, I think the answer to what do you as a service provider perhaps need to think about if you're supporting a blind or partially sighted colleague or customer to come back into your service. If we could move on to the next slide, please, Emma. I think the answer is all of the things, excuse me, all of the things that we spoke about earlier for employers, what they might be thinking, employees might be thinking. You know, people are going to be travelling into your service, using public transport. We're clearly, from what you guys have discussed in the chat, you know, there's different setups. You may have screens. I'm sure you've all had risk assessments carried out, hence reduced numbers of people coming in, no drop-in times. You will perhaps have, you know, one-way systems as best as is able, sanitizing stuff for people to use, face coverings, and, you know, perhaps other measures that you've had to put in place, cleaning, you know, the premises, making sure that computers that are being used, if you have a hot desking system, all of these things. So yeah, I think it's quite clear that, you know, as a service provider opening to the public, there's going to be lots of things. So whether it's social distancing, a new layout of your premises, one-way systems, protective screens, assigned workstations, sanitizing provisions, face covering requirements, which I think certainly in Scotland will be, you know, keeping the face coverings going for the foreseeable future. Accessible signage, you know, to let people know that these measures are in place. And even managing the queuing system outside or for using the toilets, you know, there'll be lots and lots of things that we will need to think about for customers generally, but please do, you know, bear in mind making sure that these things are accessible for people with sight loss. So thank you everyone for your comments and thoughts there. That was really, really useful.
So if we could move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so so this is the part that people quite often like. So how can RNIB help? So as ever, I would encourage everyone to make use of our free online resources. We have lots and lots of things on our website, and it is all there and available for you free of charge. So whether you're looking for information for you as an employment professional, so you might use the top link there, which is for employment professionals, or for your customer, or information for an employer that you're working with. It might be that you have a customer who's on you know, work experience or some sort of placement with an employer. So it would be important to make sure that the employer has access to these types of materials. So we have lots and lots of useful information and fact sheets. And as I say, it's all free to download and use. And please remember, our helpline is there for you as well. It's not just for people with sight loss. So anyone who needs advice in relation to sight loss can use this service, and not just about employment, about anything really. And I'll be sharing our helpline contact details later on. So as you see, I've added a couple of links to some of our web pages here, and I'm sure these could be sent on to you, or you could access them you know, on the YouTube channel once this webinar is posted. I can see that Emma's just put a note of that as well. So yep, our online resources are all free, and there's information for you as employment professionals, for your employers, and for your customers with sight loss too. And please do encourage people to use them. And you know, if you can't find something you're looking for, I'll be giving the helpline details at the end of today's presentation, and they're more than happy to assist you with that. So we're still within time, so I'll talk briefly about the quiz that I mentioned earlier. So if we could move on, Emma, to the next slide, please. Okay, so blind and partially sighted people are used to navigating a very complicated world, but COVID has in many ways completely turned that world upside down. And we had a campaign early on in lockdown to try and you know, make people aware of some of the challenges that were brought in addition to all the other challenges we had, but additional challenges for people with sight loss. Social distancing and other changes resulting from COVID relies very much on being able to see where other people are, or on understanding the new layout of what was once a familiar route. So these are the kind of things that made it impossible for many people with sight loss, and it's impacted hugely on people's independence and their confidence. It's become really difficult, if not impossible, for many people to go out for everyday essentials like food or exercise or medical appointments when these were made available. So at RNIB, we want more and more people to understand the challenges blind and partially sighted people are facing, and if they can, to learn how to help. So today, I would encourage you to take our quiz and find out more about the challenges faced by people with sight loss, and in particular, how you can help. Some of it will make you smile, and some of it, I hope, will make you stop and think. I know there was one point when I did the quiz, and I thought it tested my patience, shall we say, and understanding when people weren't keeping their distance, and I was getting quite frustrated by that, and like, you know, do you not know there's a pandemic? What are you doing here? And it might be people weren't interested and weren't following the rules, but I was certainly, it was something that really frustrated me. The quiz made me think perhaps there was a reason, and they weren't just being thoughtless and irresponsible. So it's a light-hearted exercise, but it does give you some real food for thought. And it'll get you thinking about the impact that lockdown has had on many blind and partially sighted people, what they might be struggling with, and what you can do to help, and how exactly you might offer that help. So I hope it makes people feel confident not to just look the other way, and you know, to help you feel able to make a difference. So I wonder, just really to get people's thoughts. I know people are, you know, this is people's lunch break. I ummed and ahed about whether we could look at the quiz. I don't know, it might take about 5 minutes to do it. Would that complicate things, Emma?
Not from our end. I think we've got plenty. We've got plenty of time left.
Okay.
I can stop the share and locate it.
Okay.
If people are happy for us to have a quick look at it and get a feel.
Yeah. I'm kind of thinking, rather than doing the quiz, it's a multiple choice thing. So rather than actually, answering things, we could perhaps just get people's thoughts on some of the questions. Some of them it's a bit of a no-brainer and it's obvious what the answer might be, but it'd be interesting to get some little bit of discussion on some of the less obvious questions, shall we say?
Okay, just bear with me a second. I'm just going to stop share on this screen, everybody, while I search for this, the quiz. And then what we'll do is we'll go through the questions and just get people's general responses as they would see fit. So bear with me a second.
Okay, thank you. In fairness, I hadn't really prepared, Emma, for this one. I've kind of thrown it in here.
Not a problem. Okay, I've got the question. So I'll share this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and if you could just let me know if you can see it on the screen.
Okay, right. So as you can see, it's a multiple choice questions, and if people do want to throw in their thoughts on any of the questions as we go through them, please pop something into chat, and I'll ask Emma to let us know what's there. So yeah, question one: how can you tell if a person is blind? So we've got three different sort of options here, and my thoughts are, really any of these could be the right answer. If there's anyone in the group, yep, you can't always tell. Yep, absolutely, it could be partial sight. Not everyone with sight loss has no sight at all. People can be registered blind. The new expression, the new sort of term is registered severely sight impaired, but not everybody would use a cane or a guide dog. So I would imagine you can't always tell. Yes, yeah, sorry, I'm answering the questions in chat here, Emma, after asking you.
Not a problem.
But yeah, the dog, yeah, absolutely could be a trainer. So yeah, and I think the important thing to remember is, most people with sight loss, I think it's only 4% of people who are registered blind have no sight at all. So you have a student who doesn't always use his stick. So yeah, definitely people, in familiar areas, people may not use their cane, so there's there could be, I think, any of these questions, but please do, as I say, do the quiz in your own time. I think when you answer the questions, it pops up with a little part to read, at the bottom of it, so it can offer you some good insights. So this one, when you see someone using a cane, what are they using it for? I think the question is actually when you use a long cane. Can we scroll up slightly, Emma? Is that, yes, when you see someone using a long white cane, what are they using it for? So some people may know that there are different types of white cane. You might see people carrying a shorter cane. You might, more obviously, you'll notice people who use a long cane that they maybe run the cane backwards and forwards in front of themselves as they're walking along. So different canes are for different purposes. It would be good to find treasure, but I think that's just a silly answer that we put in just to make people smile. So, okay, could we move on to the next question 3? So since lockdown began, what percentage of blind and partially sighted people feel less independent? Oh, we have a comment about the different canes. Yeah, so one of the previous webinars that we did, Darren, which is on the IEP YouTube channel, there was a sort of, I think it may have actually been the first one, just general kind of visual awareness, and we spoke about different canes and what they're used for. So if you do want more information about that, as always, go to our website or call the helpline. So somebody commented 66% feel less independent. My guess is that's probably the right answer. And of course, this isn't just going to apply for, to people who have sight loss. I think many people will have had an effect on their, their level of confidence going out, because we've been through a pretty scary time and, seen some pretty awful stuff happening, but of course these statistics are, you know, specifically around the world of sight loss. So I'm guessing it probably would be quite a high number of people, but that would be quite interesting to know. So, okay. So you see a person with a cane or a guide dog walking towards you, do you? Okay, again, we've got, I would say possibly a couple of answers that I would hope not many of us would give. So I'm thinking in this instance, the best thing to do would be to give that person some space, which again, you know, relates to the social distancing side of things. For a fully sighted person, it's generally easier for them to social distance than somebody with sight loss. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, now this was the question that I mentioned myself. So a person is finding it hard to keep their distance in a queue. Do you? And I have to say that, you know, in my experiences of going into supermarkets and walking down the street, my initial thought, if it wasn't obvious, I did tend to think that people just didn't care. Yep, hidden disability, we don't always know. And I do feel I was perhaps a little bit quick to judge, which, you know, probably came from my own fear of this virus. I didn't want to take it home with me, thank you. So there will be people who don't follow the rules and choose not to, but there could also be reasons why people are perhaps a little closer or not following the routes that are set out for us. So it's not always down to people, you know, not bothering. So, okay. Right, so you're in the supermarket. Would you try to help someone with a cane who is struggling to follow the in-store signage? How might you do this? I don't know, Emma, what would you?
I was quite taken by the spraying them with sanitizer first to make sure they're clean and hygienic, and then taking them by the arm. I'd imagine that somebody partially sighted would be quite shocked by the onslaught of that, and then just being pulled along without sort of being asked permission.
So yeah, I think that's it. And again, I think these things are there just to make us kind of smile, but I hope it's not based on someone's experience that they've fed back to us. So I would like to think, you know, the obvious answer here would be to, you know, introduce yourself and ask if someone needs some help. So I know that you know, I've in the supermarket, I've sometimes seen like older people, and they're perhaps struggling, you know, to get around. Everything's quite unfamiliar, and for an older person as well, it could be a little bit more difficult. They may have some sight loss as well. They might just be in a rush to try and get in and out as quickly as possible, and who can blame them? So, yep. Okay. And what's the next one? So what percentage of blind and partially sighted people are going to the supermarket alone during lockdown? Again, I don't know the answer to this one. I didn't write the quiz or gather the information. Yep, should we say, yeah, I know that some customers have said to me that they've been, you know, asked because they have someone with them to help them with that. One lady said she was told she couldn't take someone in at one point when it was just you were only allowed to go into the supermarket on your own. And she was basically, well, I can't because I can't see. I don't know how that kind of panned out, but I would imagine she's not the only person that experienced that. So, yep.
So we have a quick look and see what the answer is.
Yeah, let's see what it is.
There we are.
Yeah, so unfortunately, just 14% of blind and partially sighted people told us that they were still going shopping in-store independently during lockdown. That's half as many as before social distancing measures were introduced, showing the real impact this is having. And I know we had another little video that popped up on our sort of internal kind of like workplace Facebooky type thing, and it spoke about people having to pick products up and bring them closer to their face so they could see what it was. So the labeling isn't always obvious at a distance on a shelf. And sometimes people were complaining that people were picking things up and then putting them back down again. So of course we were all encouraged not to be touching things unless we really had to. So why are you picking up and putting it back? Because I can't actually see what it is. So that just really adds to the weight of needing somebody perhaps with you, so that you're not picking things up, putting them back, and risking transmission. So yeah, I'm not surprised at that figure, to be honest. So okay, and what do we have next? I'm guessing there's 10 questions. There might not be. So so if you're asked for directions from a blind or partially sighted person, would you? What's people's thoughts on this one? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I would think so, that the middle one describe things. I think if if the person, if you could perhaps say to them, is it helpful if I point the direction? For some people it might be. Some people can have their vision is affected in different ways. So pointing to something, they may have good central vision that they can see what you're looking at, but just not much in the way of peripheral vision. So perhaps asking, perhaps asking the person, what works best for them. So I'm just laughing at Darren's comment there at the end. So. Okay, so I don't know if there's any more questions. I'm looking at the slide bar at the side. There might be a couple more. So. Yep. So if you see a person with a cane or guide dog who you think is struggling to cross a road, would you? Well, we could hide, like avoid them. Yeah. So I think I can understand people wanting to, perhaps stand behind somebody. I think the difficulty about being behind someone and taking their arm is it's almost like you're pushing them out in the road. That could be really quite scary. So I would imagine that, can I ask, can I help you, to ask somebody? I think that would be the right answer, wouldn't it? So yeah. But again, as I say, when you answer these questions, you get a little piece at the bottom that maybe gives you a few things to think about. So let's see which says, yeah. So many people avoid a person using a cane or with a guide dog because they're unsure how to help. I think that's right, regardless of COVID. So if you think someone's struggling, rather than avoid them, just simply ask if you can help and let the person tell you what would be useful. So yeah, some good advice there. And what I think will be the last question, which of the following measures introduced to enforce social distancing could cause difficulties for blind or partially sighted people? I would imagine that all of these, yep. So, so I think whichever one you tick in this one, you're probably going to get a similar answer. Protective screens, one-way systems, and only one adult. So, yep, all of these measures could be difficult for someone. So, so yeah, it's I think these little bits at the bottom of each one would give you some food for thoughts and some ideas of perhaps what we've maybe not thought of, and more importantly how we can help. So to finish off, yep, we've used our time nicely, I think, today. So just in closing, I'd like to thank everyone for coming along today, and a big thank you to Emma for her support with today's session. And sorry to keep calling you Helen all the time, and it's just out of habit. So our webinar for next month is on the 11th of August. There's of course going to be other ones which aren't RNIB ones before then, but on the 11th of August we'll be talking about in-work support and how RNIB can help you to keep your client in work. So we'll be discussing support which could be provided through the Access to Work scheme, including how your customer might use support workers and Access to Work support for travel. So before we close, I just wondered if there's any questions or comments anyone could put forward. We're getting some nice thank you messages, which is always good to hear. And please do, please do go away and and take the quiz. The answers may be obvious, but the pieces of information that come with it can be helpful too. So there is a slide at the end that's not up on the screen just now, and it's the details of the helpline. So just to give you the helpline telephone number is 0303 123 9999. Or you can email helpline@rnib.org.uk. As I said, the helpline is there for everyone, any question relating to sight loss. If the advisors on the phone don't have the answer, they'll put you in touch with whoever in the various teams that can help you. It's not just for blind people. So thank you, and thank you, Emma.
Thank you very much, Heather. That was a fantastic session. Thank you, everybody. As normal, this will appear on the IEP YouTube channel within the next coming days. So please do check that out and subscribe to look at some of our previous and forthcoming sessions. For those of you that might not be aware, we have our 70-second session next week, and it's a webinar hosted by Meraki Consulting, and the topic will be how to handle participant feedback and complaints effectively, which sounds like quite a gritty one to get your teeth into. So I'm going to stop recording now. Feel free to finish your joining, and we look forward to meeting you again, and thanks very much for coming.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.